Yeah, we're going live. 1 second, guys. Okay, here we are. Cool. So I'm going to share this to the group. 1 second. Share to the group. Man, this is so much fun. This is so cool. Get accepted to a top private high school. All right. So we should see it in the group now. Do you see it? All right, hey guys, we're just sharing this on Facebook, so you should be able to see it there as well. Just double checking, but we should be live. And yeah, so yeah, Robert, if you could, I don't know if you could also like look and see if we're live in the group, but that would be cool. We're just double checking real quick, guys, and we're gonna get started. We got tons of stuff to talk about, and I'm looking forward to it. All right, so yeah, we're in there. Awesome. All right, welcome, guys. My name is Trevor Ramos. I'm the author of How to Get Free Money for College. This is part of a series that we're creating just on all things related to college entrance, college admissions, paying for college, getting scholarships, and anything else that we can think of that might be helpful to a parent who's about to send a kid to college. So we also have our wonderful co-host, Robert Powers. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about how to get accepted to a top private high school, actually. So we're talking about high school today. So I guess we'll get started. So Robert, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do with families and students?
Absolutely. Thanks, Trevor. Do we have an echo, or okay?
No, I'm good. Actually, before I say that, hey guys, I just want to let you know, like, not only is this being recorded, but it is also being posted on Facebook. First of all, obviously, if you like the content, encourage you to share, tag anybody that you find will be that you think would find this information helpful. But also know that if you want to make sure you're not in the recording, make sure you keep your camera off. You can send questions in the chat or in the Facebook comments. But yeah, I can hear you perfect, Robert.
Wonderful.
Okay, great. Yeah, so tell us, like, so, what's your background on this stuff about, getting people into private high schools? Because we're talking about how to get into high schools in your local area or day schools. So maybe if you live in Los Angeles, you might be looking at sending your kid to Loyola or sending your kid to Flint Ridge Prep or one of these schools like that. Or you might actually be considering sending them to boarding school, like Philip Exeter or Emma Willard. So, how do you get into this stuff?
So I've been college counseling in Los Angeles for a long time, and since the very beginning, I've worked with families who are considering private schools as well, and private schools, including boarding schools. Families have different reasons for wanting to pursue a private school, and I think that it's been a really good fit for me to help them because of my own experience in private schools. I have had about 6 years of experience in the private school systems, and sorry, not the systems, just the schools. And it's been it's been really helpful for me to support families knowing what goes on inside of private schools, including the admissions processes there. It's very similar to college in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it's also very different. And of course, they can kind of do what they want at private schools, which is stressful, but that's also why people like them. So, um, yeah, every year I have quite a few students who are looking at private schools, but they're all different kinds of private schools.
Yeah, and that's and you've brought up a lot of you opened up a lot of cans of worms as they say. Um, so obviously if you want your child to have the best education available to them or the best shot at life or you hear all these things being thrown around in terms of should you send your kid to a private school, should you send your kid to a public school, should you send them to a charter school, should you homeschool them, right? So and I just want everybody to know. So when we're talking about private high schools, this is really a talk for parents of middle schoolers. And you might even actually already have a kid in high school, but maybe you want them to transfer to a private high school, stuff like that. So let me ask you, like, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of having your kid attend a private school?
Um, Absolutely. I would clarify by saying that private school really is for students of any age. That I've worked with sixth graders looking at private school in seventh grade, and that seems like it's very young to work with students, but it's also very young for students to be expected to write those difficult essays. Um, so in Los Angeles, there are a few private schools that have a seventh grade admissions year where you could apply in other years, but in seventh grade, that's when schools like Harvard Westlake and Flint Ridge Prep admit a greater amount of students, and so that's really when families should aim at trying to enroll there. Uh, Also, students, of course, eighth graders apply for ninth grade, but some students aren't happy with their school in ninth grade and they have to go there to find out. And so they're looking at attending in 10th or 11th grade. If those aren't admissions years, then they've got a tougher shot, but they could still look at it. The only thing I would tell students to be wary about is transferring for 12th grade. And Trevor, as you work with high school students as well applying to college, you probably have had some 11th grade families come to you and say, we're really doing great, but we hate our school and we're thinking about moving right now. And when they ask me that, I know I have to tell them, I love private schools and I'd love to tell you about them, but you may want to stay at the school you're at because you've built up your relationships there. You need to get recommendations from teachers and counselors. It may not be the time to leave unless, of course, there's some sort of crisis or there's some sort of problem. So I do see students of all ages looking at private schools. Whether they should be, whether they need a consultant is a different question. Sometimes it's just a simple thing. And other times they're looking at a broad range of schools, or they don't know what kind of schools they want, or they're looking at all these competitive schools where they're really going to have a very stressful experience, and a consultant can help them minimize some of that stress. The question you asked me, though, the question you asked me was about advantages and disadvantages of private schools. This is an important question because families need to know whether families need to know their reason for applying to private school, not just because I think that that's really important, but also because they're going to need to be able to articulate that in the application process. What is it about the school that's leading you to attend? The difference in the price tag between your local public school or even a charter school. There are lots of charter schools that could be good fits for families. And then polytechnic school, and the difference is astronomical. Families should be attending polytechnic school because they need something there, that there's something there that's really going to enhance the experience. So when you're looking at private schools, you should be looking at the resources there. What is it there that makes it special? Lots of families want to attend the private schools because of their size. Um, that's a good reason. It does lead to more questions of, okay, so what now? What else besides the size? Size is just one thing, but certainly your classes should be smaller at private schools. it differs from school to school. So part of families research would be checking out the size of the classes, of individual classes. Um, of course, academic programs are different than in public schools, but families should be asking specific questions uh, to get into the details of that. That to just say that, well, Polytechnic School has these top rated programs is it's sort of reductive when really is it a kind of science course you're hoping to take. The web schools in Claremont, which are so fantastic, they have like a little neuroscience program there. The not not the size of a college department, but they've got a neuroscience class, and they've got neuroscience equipment, like actually these cool things that strap onto the students' heads, and they can kind of check out each other's brain waves. And I'm not going to get into the science because I don't know it, but the fact that they've got that might be a reason for families to attend that school, especially if students would follow up on that experience. So I think that's one of the most powerful things students can do in high school, is to have an experience in the classroom and then follow up on it somewhere else outside of school. And that's why students meet with me as a college counselor. Sometimes they're trying to figure out, how can I enhance my high school experience? Well, if the private school can do that for students in-house, that's pretty special. So they would offer some experience that just inspired or motivated the students to want to do more. Something to check out with private schools are the courses that they offer, and what courses would students want to take. So I mentioned the web schools. They have a whole curriculum of advanced courses that are meant to take the place of AP courses. That curriculum is very specialized. Or it's not very specialized, it's very special. It's very special curriculum that could be good for a lot of families, but also a lot of families are a little frustrated when they learn about it. They say, where are my AP classes though? They said, actually, I came to a top school because I really planned to take a bunch of AP classes. And I hoped that you weren't going to stop me from taking AP classes like I heard the public school was. Well, the web schools don't offer AP classes, at least not many of them. That's just not what they do. They've got these other courses instead. So it really depends on what families are looking for. But being able to search inside of a private school is to be able to see what a place could offer if they didn't have any restrictions. Some places try to offer something very traditional, and other places are going to offer something really different. Other things that could set a private school apart from a public school are more social and emotional. Of course, there are some schools out there that are really equipped to help students who need more social support or need more emotional support. Some schools, like the Nueva School in Northern California, have an amazing social emotional learning program that's part of the school and even part of the curriculum. At times it gets integrated into the classroom, and that's really cool for families who appreciate that. Is there some gray area between having some like huge amazing social emotional learning program and something else, having nothing, or being a public school? I'd say absolutely. So when you look at the schools and their missions and you look at what they prioritize, they may mention social emotional learning or maybe something to ask them about, but how much do they help students with struggles outside of academia? How much is this institution a place of learning, and how much of it is a place of growth? And you can ask them about their institutional priorities to learn about that. It's not that public schools don't support students outside of academics. It's that public schools are meant to serve everybody, and so they can't really niche down the mission in that way. And of course, they're stretched on resources most of the time. They can't have social emotional learning programs there to the same extent that a private school could. check out everything, see what private schools offer that makes them special. So sports is sort of an obvious one. If your private school has the sports, one, if it's your sport, that makes a difference for you. And also two, it could even maybe means a financial incentive to attend the school if it's a niche sport, especially like water polo or something like that. Equipment and facilities, more than just like, is this a nice campus? Because it usually is. You walk on, you go, oh, this is a nice campus. But sometimes they've got special things, or sometimes the the library, they've got certain resources there, or they've got collaborations with other schools. Other things about a private school, of course, are the teachers. And I don't think a lot of students are doing this in their research of private high schools, but to get to know the teacher that you would have in the future, I mean, of course, you're probably not going to go to coffee with them, but to learn their names and what makes them special is part of students' high school research. They should talk to students who actually have been to that school and have had those teachers and say, do I want to take classes with these teachers? Are these teachers going to inspire me to want to do things outside of the classroom? Private schools can hire all sorts of faculty that they don't need to have credentials. A lot of times that scares families. They say they could hire anybody. And a lot of times families know how cool that is, that they can hire. I have a friend who used to be a neuroscientist at UC San Francisco. And then he went on to teach the science program at a private school in Northern California. And it's pretty cool, the kinds of stuff he does in the classroom, because he knows to do it, but he doesn't have a teaching degree. If you went for the person that had a different education, that they had the teaching degree, it would just be a different experience in that classroom. So those are all the things that I would say to start with. And after that, as you're looking into the schools, dig into the little rabbit holes that come up. You say, oh, I saw this cool facility. Oh, but they also have this there. And then you kind of chase after it. It's really a lot like college research.
Yeah, so that brings up two very interesting things. Number one, it kind of makes me think, if you ask somebody, why are you applying to, these high schools? Why are you applying to Frontledge Prep? Why are you applying to Harvard Westlake? Why are you applying to Westridge? Or, many of them may just be applying because of the name. They haven't really determined what the difference is and why someone would go to one school versus another. And, these applications will ask you those questions. And that's, one of the ways that they weed them out. But it also brought up this thing of, does going to a private high school make it easier to get into college?
No, not on the surface. No. So it's the thing about how students might have more resources, more to work with. And for some students, that would empower them to be their best selves. And students who are at their best are more likely to have a sort of shinier trajectory if they wanted it, if that was something that they wanted. However, you have to remember when you attend, especially if we're talking about top schools, like these really competitive schools, the student bodies at these schools are very competitive, just kind of like how you'd expect, having tried and worked so hard to even get into the doors of a school like Harvard Westlake or Phillips Exeter. You arrived there, and it's true that you've got these amazing resources, and the counselors are really trained to write the best letters. But it's at the very least canceled out by the fact that you're surrounded by such a competitive applicant pool applying to the same college as you are. Some of those counselors know to have students apply to different colleges, but that can be painful if you are going to Harvard Westlake and your counselor says, listen, I know you've got your heart set on Brown, but and they're not going to say it this way, but essentially your peer has a lot better chance than you. And or your peer has the same chance as you, I'm going to steer you to this college and you to this college. Because if you both apply to the same one of you is likely to get rejected. So just being at those schools creates a lot of problems for competitive admissions. We're talking about like really selective schools uh, that might not come up at a public school, where if you were there being your best self, you would have a lot of stuff to do with your hands. At a public school, you would be able to solve problems, because there are problems everywhere. Not that they're problem filled places, but just that way that the private school hasn't come in to set everything up and make everything ready and perfect. There's so many opportunities in public schools that I think make those students um, also in a really good place to succeed for college admissions. I definitely think that students looking at private high schools and boarding schools should be looking at them for a reason about the school. There's something about the school is special, something about it would be a good fit, because trying to position yourself in a private school in order to get to the elite college of your dreams is a recipe for pain, and it probably will work out, but not the way that families think it will.
Okay, so then are some of these private high schools like feeder schools for highly selective colleges?
Well, it's a lot in the same way as if you ask that about the private schools. So I get that question about the private schools. Which middle school can I put my child into that the middle school will feed into the high school? Well, it's true that the high schools get to know some of the middle schools, and they tend to take more students from those schools, but also those schools may be schools for gifted children, or just nearby, that there's competitive students at those schools, or that they know that those students are a good fit. So the same thing with colleges, like, or if they have private schools that they tend to take a larger percentage of students from, it's probably because they know students from that school are a good fit, or they know students there are working harder, or those are very competitive students at that private school. So they are taking more than just one, but, or they could take more than just one, but we don't, but it's still not all of them. And it's still a very low percentage if you think that you're going to go to the private school in order to be one of those very few that goes to the school that you're thinking of. I got to meet one of the admissions reps from Haverford College in Pennsylvania, and she told me when I was just chatting with her, and I told her about the private school that I used to work at, and she got so excited, her eyes lit up, and she said, "Oh, I know that school. I know Chadwick School." She says, "I know Chadwick because uh, at Haverford we love those students." And she says, "Those students are always very energetic and outgoing, and they tend to prioritize community service in a way that's authentic and not just about like doing hours." And she says, "Whenever those students have come to Haverford in the past, we meet them and we were like, yes, we made the right choice." And I think that's kind of what a feeder school is like, that the admissions at a college is going to have known that schools, uh, they make students that might be a good fit. So that doesn't mean that some um, if some student just ended up at that school, that they would be going to Haverford. I mean, they would have to be the student that Haverford was expecting. That um, and again, I just would emphasize that the statistics are not on the side of somebody who's trying to game that system.
Yeah, and I recognize these questions that I've asked you are really subjective, and this is the fun part about it, because this is what we're all thinking. So here's another one for you. How does a school that has an IB program, or a school that is in an area that charges a lot of property taxes, stack up to one of the selective private high schools in terms of what kind of colleges these kids end up at?
for college, colleges are really trying to evaluate applicants based on the context of their environment. So at a private school, you're kind of paying for the environment. And that's, like we discussed, kind of a double-edged sword where you have the environment, but everybody else has the environment too. At at a public school, so public schools and private schools could offer an IB program, but a public school with an IB program is offering one of the best educational pathways that I think exist in America, and that's because it's globally recognized. That that in other countries they don't really know what to do with our AP tests, but they really try. They try to be really nice and work with us about AP scores. But when students apply to universities in England with an IB diploma, they over there they know what that is. Anyways, that doesn't mean that they would prioritize those students because of. No, I take that back. So abroad, they would prioritize the IB diploma. But I don't think in general colleges are prioritizing one specific kind of place over another. It's about how a student is doing in the context of their environment. So if a student goes to a fancy private school, but they're unhappy, they're going to get grades that reflect being unhappy, or worse, they'll get grades that are really high, but they'll be unhappy, and that will bubble up in other places. And they'll be unhealthy. And I don't think unhealthy students are terribly successful. The to compare with a student who goes to even a low performing public school but is really succeeding there and trying to make a difference, I think that student would be a very good alternative. In terms of the high income area, you're talking about these public schools with really high income areas.
Yeah, let's say in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, La Cañada High School, Redondo Union High School, Maricosta High School. Some people say, "What's the point of me sending my kid to a private high school when I already, our district is already one of the top in the state, so on and so forth."
Um, so when you actually get into the research, the specifics of these schools, you again find that they're different. So those for a lot of families, if they make that point, that's a good point, that some of these public schools are super powered, and they wouldn't be getting much more at a private school in terms of what they want. If what they want are great classes and a competitive atmosphere, they've got that at both private schools and public schools. Great classes and a competitive atmosphere, especially when the classes they want are AP courses, and that's what public schools do. They offer AP courses. So there's some merit to that, but that school environment may not be the one that you want for every aspect. So socially, some of those schools are miserable places. Um, so I know some of these really competitive public schools where students go and they can't be successful because they just can't kind of keep their stress down in these places. And for those students to be able to find a private school where first of all, where someone would be paying attention to that, but second of all, where whatever their chance to shine wasn't going to get drowned out in all the competition and grade seeking, that could be really empowering for that student. Of course, that high school wouldn't be a super competitive place, probably. I mean, that place would probably be a little bit more down to earth with a social emotional mission, like I discussed earlier. And then the public schools also, of course, they just have limited resources, even when they're in really nice places. So even the really, really high earning areas still have very few counselors for every student. If you want a place that has like a full-on college counseling program in the private in the school, that's got to be a private school. The public schools just aren't able to do that. And similar things to that public schools still may not have all of the resources that you thought you were getting.
Yeah, and I honestly just love how um, gracefully you're covering these points. So just so you know, when Robert's talking, he's talking in generalities, which is very difficult to do because let's just say a high school counselor at a particular high school is watching this. You know, they might say, well, my school environment isn't like that. We've got 6 counselors for 600 students. But we're talking about a whole landscape here. And that's what's just really amazing about what he's sharing. But I want to switch gears here. So we talked about the benefits and some of the reasons to apply to a private school and to consider it and all that. But how much do these private schools actually cost?
They can be very expensive. In many cases, they could rival the cost of a college education, like a year in college. So the tippy top ones, and I just mean the famous ones that either the famous ones nationally or the famous ones in your area. Those tend to cap out around 40. I think 40 is when families find that they're paying more than they pay for some colleges. The you will get to the school and they'll want more money for things. So it's not the end of it. Almost all these schools expect families to volunteer their time and contribute financially. It's the annual fund. The costs don't stop. Not all schools are at that price point. The upper 30s, low 40s per year. Some schools are more affordable. Maybe that's part of their mission, so they want to be able to offer this to more students. It's a marketplace, so the schools are charging what the market will bear. I'm in the Pasadena area of Los Angeles, and there are quite a few private schools out here because the market really supports them. That they're it's really problematic that they're all leaving the public school system or they wouldn't enter it. But the private school market flourishes out here, and not just the tippy top ones. So they're all looking at their tuition annually and seeing whether, and mostly they're sending it up every year. The schools that are likely to be more affordable include Christian schools and Catholic schools. That those schools tend to get some funds from like the diocese and other places like that. So so definitely, if price is a concern, but you can't do the public school for some reason, Christian schools are a place to look. I think it could be tough to send a student to a Christian school if that student had issues with being in a Christian environment all day. However, some Christian schools, especially Episcopal schools, I think, but in general, all of these religious schools have the potential to be sort of like open-minded places that embrace everybody, and it's worth checking out. So if families aren't Christian, but they need a more affordable school, they could explore the Christian schools and see if any of them are nice, friendly places to be a diverse student at. It's not Loyola. You mentioned Loyola. I don't think that would be a good fit for students who are not into the Jesuit school. I have seen a school as cheap as like $4,000 a year, and I remember hearing that and I thought that can't be right. $4,000 is what you pay. That was one of the Armenian schools. The Armenian schools are supported by the AGBU, and that they just really supported them with the funds that they needed, that families only needed to pay that much in order to attend. of course, that's a broader mission that's being fulfilled than just one family's education or one school's education. That's a very niche place for the families in the Armenian community that are getting what they need and finding a cultural, I guess, a place that would nurture that part of their culture that they wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah, so and just real quick, so like, let's say we're not talking about, let's say we're talking about like Flint Ridge, not for sure, Flint Ridge Sacred Heart, or like a Damien, or like a LaSalle. Are those schools also 40 grand a year?
No, so um, you just named a bunch of Christian schools. So Flint Ridge Sacred Heart Academy is a Catholic school, so it's going to come out at like 26, 27. Maranatha in Pasadena is something like 20,000. I think that you get a lot more for the price with probably with Fashaw that they um, I think that they really have something cool going on there. So you can't always compare the schools to each other. If one school offers many more resources and a much better experience, is the $7,000 really something to is that really um, a price break at one over the other? But um, how much is LaSalle? LaSalle is um, I don't have the number
I
off.
want to say LaSalle is about 25, 26, maybe 28. But yeah, so they're not like the 40 grand. And then by the way, there are schools that are more than 40 grand, right? You've got Windward, you've got the Buckley School, you've got schools that are actually almost as expensive as universities. But yeah, 40 grand is, when we talk about some of the selective like private high schools that we're talking about that have these really advanced curriculums, they're usually around 35, 40 grand a year. But there are definitely schools that are more than that. And what's the financial aid look like? Is there a lot of resources that they can get so that they're not paying full price, or?
That's a great question. The all of the schools have their own financial aid policies, but there are financial aid systems that could exist. The While they could all have their own policies, it tends to look like this. The expectation for financial aid is that families in general are responsible for supporting the costs of a private education for their child, period. So beyond that, if families with need, which means that they can demonstrate there are different systems, but systems like FACS, like a financial aid system for students applying to high school, if they can demonstrate by sharing the exhaustive details of families' finances that they have need that they cannot pay for the education that they're applying for, some schools may be open to meeting that because it helps them with institutional priorities. So to be able to admit students essentially on scholarship. That may happen in the world of college admission. We would call it need aware admissions. So when high schools are considering students' applications for admission, they also are looking at that part of the application that says, "Are you applying for financial aid?" And then they talk with financial aid to say, "Well, how much does this student cost us?" And that can be a detrimental conversation to a student's application. A student who says, "Oh, don't worry, I'll pay the full price," may have a much easier time being admitted than that student that says, "Well, I need this amount of money." And if a student has the need and they are admitted, they could find two things happening. One, the student could admit them and give a scholarship for the need. That scholarship could be uh, like a front-loaded scholarship. So like it could support them in freshman year, but then sophomore year, they would say, actually, we need to reevaluate this since it's a yearly award. So there are some risks, I think, in being a student on scholarship at some schools. The another thing that could happen, and happens all the time, is that the private schools will admit the students, give them some of that scholarship, but not all of it. And they put families in a really tough situation, because if they couldn't afford the private education, um, at least not more than $10,000, and they knew that they couldn't afford $30,000, getting a bill for $20,000 is a tough situation, because the family's thinking about loans at that point. And they haven't even gotten to college yet, and the families are already taking out loans for the students. And I think that's really, really tough. I think that high schools probably shouldn't put families in that position at all, given that they have that financial information about what families can afford. Um, Sometimes that fax system is really messed up too, and sometimes families cannot afford the price that it says they can, and they apply anyways, and they get a scholarship that's not enough to support them. It's tough to be a student who needs financial aid at the schools. There are also the other side of things, right? Families that don't have need, at least not demonstrated need, and they're hoping to get a cheaper tuition because private school is just very expensive. According to the mission of private schools, helping those families is not their priority. At very competitive schools like Harvard Westlake, it's printed in the policies. It says um, we don't giving money to those families is not part of the game. However, it doesn't happen. They say it doesn't happen, but I guess it does. Students who the school is truly incentivized to get to come may offer financial aid, um, if the students applied for the financial aid, like beyond the number that it gave. And I've seen this for students who play really niche sports, like water polo or um, something like that, the javelin or whatever the niche sport is, that high school wants to continue that team and have a competitive team, but there aren't a lot of middle schoolers doing that sport, so they'll incentivize the students to come. But if when that's happening at the competitive schools, it's not something that's happening openly. I think it ends up being a little bit of a surprise, or kind of under the radar. If you're not at the competitive schools, then they can give all sorts of merit scholarships. So LaSalle has a scholarship that they give to students just for scoring high on the ISE, HSPT over there. They get a certain score on HSPT and they get a big scholarship from LaSalle. Now, that scholarship is still only like half of tuition. So it's still a lot to attend LaSalle if it wasn't the place you really wanted to go. So it kind of depends on what families are after, where they apply, and what their need is.
Gosh, yeah. Robert, you are very knowledgeable on this stuff, man. We're like, our objective was to try to cover boarding school. We don't even have time to talk about it. We're gonna have to turn it into a whole other one just to go over that. Now, you help people through the application process of applying to a private high school or transferring from a public high school to a private high school, or a private high school to another. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what is that kind of work involved from your end?
It's a lot like the college application process, where students need to portray their true selves, and they don't know how. So even though they're younger than high school students applying to college, neither of those students knows how to authentically portray themselves in writing. That lots of adults can't really authentically portray themselves in an essay. So asking it of a high schooler, much less a middle schooler, is a big ask. So helping students portray themselves on the application is a big part of the application process. The the students need to be applying to the right schools. So I know that we already talked about that, but it is the application process. If you're applying to the wrong school, and you're trying to make a case for you being a good fit there, it's a bad application no matter how well you write your essays. So, really making sure the student understands, what is this school, why do you want to go, and why are you specifically a good fit for this school specifically? Being able to articulate those things, having a knowledge of the private schools and a knowledge of the student. Part of the job is getting to know the student really well to be able to help the student articulate that, because parents aren't really able to do that for the student usually. The um, Much less the student on their own having to write an essay like, why is this school going to be good for you? Having them do that. The application process can include anything. So each of the schools makes their own application, and they could, they're going to give the standard things with some variations between schools. So some of the schools, I was just talking about essays, some of the schools offer have an application that requires a lot of essays. The Chadwick application is actually unbelievable. Like, there's so many essays that I think that they must be trying to get students to not revise them. Like if you're doing more than 10 essays for a school, and it was more than that, then I mean, how much time could students possibly have to like really get into those answers and revise them? Some of them have no essays. So Flint Ridge Prep actually doesn't have any essays required. They must believe that that's not giving them the information that they want. So requirements vary, but there are typically teacher recommendations requested, and they may specify what teachers they want. So someone like me can talk with middle school students about how to approach those teachers and request those recommendations. I'll tell you though, it's really awesome when families find me early enough that I can talk to the student about how to shine while they're in the class, and not like just trying to send the teacher an email. Or students can write brag sheets. Brag sheets are being a material that they make that tries to help the teacher recall and frame the student's performance in the class. So besides essays and recommendations, the schools can ask for short answers, like kind of these quick takes, like, what's your favorite blank? What do what's this? They almost always want an interview. That certainly there are schools that don't want the interview, but I sort of wonder about that. Private schools are looking for students that are going to be a good fit there. They are not looking for the tippy top best students unless they're schools where the only good fit for them is a tippy top student. That sounds like a miserable school to be at, by the way, to be one where everybody is scoring nines on the essay, in the ISEE, and trying to go to Harvard. That sounds like a really stressful place.
Yeah, and while you're at it, like, how important are so you got the ISEE, you got the SSAT, and you got the HSP, which are basically like the SAT for private high schools and middle schools. How important is that for them to score really high on those exams?
It varies on the institution. Some of them have for some schools, that's a high priority, is having students that will perform well on tests. These are schools that want to be able to brag about the students' admissions to college later, but not all schools are like that. Some schools barely care. For the really competitive schools where families are usually asking about the ISE, how important is this? How important is this? The answer is usually very, pretty important. That the schools want students who do well in tests and are competitive, that they don't have to worry about academically. Even if they would do well in classes, that they don't have to wonder, is the student keeping up with everything? So you usually if the parent is asking about it, then it is important.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed is that some of these high schools, they not only want essays from the child, but they want essays from the parents.
Yeah.
So how many of these schools are really asking for stuff like that?
That's pretty frequent. So in the application process, the students are being evaluated, but also the parents are being evaluated. This is one of the big differences from a college application season, is that parents could be put on the put in the hot seat for sometimes just for a minute. Sometimes they have a little interview, and the interview is just kind of baked into their kid's interview, and they don't even realize that they're being interviewed. But admissions definitely wanted 5 minutes with those parents to talk to them. Other times the parents are writing full essays. That's pretty common that they would be asked to write at least a statement or an essay or two. But sometimes parents have 6 to 10 essays. I can't believe that they would ask for 10 essays from parents, but 6 to 7, something like that, is a lot of essays. But I work with the parents to write those essays. The parents, just like the kids, sometimes are trying to write what they think the school wants to hear, and that's not always the thing to do. They really just want information. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, let me just make that clear if it isn't clear already. Not only will your kid have to write an essay for some of these high schools, but you will have to write an essay for some of these high schools. And for some of you guys, it may have been a very long time since you had to write an actual, full on essay. Brings back flashbacks and things like that. I know. So okay, so this is all the stuff that you have to do and that you have to watch out for. And then, it's not just the essay, it's really the research on the school so that you can write a good essay. I mean, that's not everything, but that's a huge part of it. Would you agree?
Yes, there are different essays asking different things. Some of the essays are asking about the school itself, or the candidate and why the candidate would be a good fit. Other essays are very personal and ask for a time when you failed and what you learned from it. And that's a different kind of self-searching that the students have to do in order to be able to discuss their inner life, that's tough for high schoolers applying to college, is to be able to describe a time they failed. If you ask a middle schooler, they may just freeze. So different essays are tough in different ways.
Yeah, and yeah, that's true. So okay, so how do we, this video we have no idea where this video is going to end up on on social media. So how do parents find you if they want you to help their kid get accepted to a private high school or boarding school or private middle school for that matter?
If parents want to ask me questions or get in touch with me, they can reach out to me directly. So my email is robert@collegetorch.com. I'm Robert Powers. They could also check out my website. It's www.collegetorch.com. I would also encourage parents to join our Facebook group if they're not already in it. Facebook.com/group/college counseling, and they could get some information from us that way, and we could answer their questions in that group.
Yeah. So this is and I we do, or I do primarily college, but I get so many questions from parents that have 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds about what should I be thinking about right now. And this might be something to consider, and I think we'll bring up a couple other things along the way that that you can think about as well. At this point, we can take any questions from the audience or from the group. You always see me looking over here. It's because I'm looking at another screen to try to monitor the comments. So if you have any questions or comments, we can field them with the time that we have left. We'll definitely be back. Any closing thoughts, Robert? Anything you want to kind of put a capper on?
I don't think so. Yeah, just like applying to college, applying to private school is an important time, a stressful time, and it feels very high stakes. That that could be a reason to get support with it. But also, it always works out that families end up at schools that will support them, or they have supports there. They just need to find them. Uh, I think private school can be a really good place for a lot of students. They just need to find the right one, just like college.
Yeah, and with everything, just the way I am is I want you guys to really consider everything so that you can decide if this is something that you want to really do and take seriously. So we want to address all the, well, if I go to this private high school, that it's a feeder school to go to this school, or, you know, is it really better for me to go to a private school than my local public school, so on and so forth. So, and once you've evaluated all that and you've decided this is what you want to do, now you've got all the steps that you have to do in order to make sure that you get the best outcome that you can, and that may require some advice and some counseling from Robert. So anyway, guys, I really appreciate you joining us. You know where to find us. We're in the parents of college bound students Facebook group. You can find Robert at collegetorch.com. You can find me at collegefundingremedies.com. And we're going to sign off and hope to hear from you soon. Take care, guys.